Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin today's session of the comprehensive news analysis, an important announcement. Tomorrow's class in the Target Prelims 2022 Crash Course series on our YouTube channel will be on all the important reports and indices in the past 365 days or so. Don't forget to join this class if you have to ensure that your preparation for this upcoming UPSC prelims is up to the mark. As you know, this crash course will go on live till 21st of May every evening at 7:30 p.m. If you have not subscribed to our channel till now, make sure that you hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS and avail this free of cost crash course. Now let's begin today's session with the first article, which is about Prime Minister Modi's short visit to Nepal on the occasion of the Buddha Jayanti. The Prime Minister of India, as you know, visited Lumbini, that is the birthplace of Gautam Buddha in Nepal. Now, although this was a short term visit to Nepal, it had a lot of consequences. When the Prime Minister was in Nepal, he also laid the foundation stone for India International Center for Buddhist Culture and Heritage in the Lumbini Monastic Zone. Apart from this, there were also multiple memorandums of understandings that were signed between the two sides, including for development of a hydropower project in Nepal. Now, interestingly, you would have read in the past few years, the bilateral relations between India and Nepal had not been at their best, with the Chinese increasing their influence in Nepal. When Nepal had Prime Minister KP Oli in power, especially, he made a lot of remarks that went against the long standing cultural relation between India and Nepal. There were, in fact, multiple boundary disputes and also historical disputes that came up between the two sides during the prime ministership of Mr. KP Oli. But now, with the new prime minister in power, that is Mr. Deoba, situation has now started to improve. Nepalese Prime Minister, in fact, visited India a few weeks back, and now this is being seen as a reciprocatory visit by the Indian Prime Minister to Nepal. It also comes at a time when Nepal is at the center of attention for a lot of world powers, including China and the US also. We have seen how the US, under its ongoing MCC program, is offering a help of about $500 million to Nepal to develop their energy related infrastructure, which has not gone down well with China or even with India. Our Prime Minister's visit to Nepal was much more than just a cultural visit. It was also seen as a visit to highlight the fact that we have not forgotten Nepal and it remains a top priority when it comes to our neighborhood and our foreign policy decision making. The two sides also discussed collaboration in the fields of connectivity and transportation. As you know, Nepal is a landlocked country, meaning that it is a lot dependent on India for supply of even the most essential commodities. And that is why India has to play a very important role in ensuring development of Nepal. Now, during this visit, there were a total of 6 MOUs that were signed. These included the ICCR and the Lumbini Buddhist University signing an MOU for establishment of Dr. Ambedkar Chair for Buddhist Studies. Then there was another MOU signed between ICCR and the CNAS, Tribhuvan University in Nepal. Then there was also a memorandum for establishing ICCR Chair of Indian Studies, and apart from that, there was also a memorandum between the Kathmandu University and IIT Madras, so on and so forth. Which also highlights the fact that India also wants to deepen its long standing strong relationship with Nepal despite the latest problems that we have had in the past few years or so. And this seems to be a step in the right direction. On the occasion of the Buddha Jayanti, the Prime Minister Modi also visited Uttar Pradesh's Kushinagar, which houses the famous Mahaparinirvan Stupa. He said on his Twitter handle that the government is making numerous efforts to boost infrastructure in Kushinagar so that more and more tourists and pilgrims can come here. If you remember, a couple of years back in 2020, there was a controversy about the birthplace of Gautam Buddha between India and Nepal. What had happened was that in 2020, our external minister had made a statement in which he had referred to Gautam Buddha as an Indian. Now, as per our foreign minister, this particular statement was misinterpreted, but the Nepalese media said that there is a mistake from India's part, and Indian foreign minister has said that Gautam Buddha was born in India. But there was a clarification issued from the Indian government and from the office of the foreign minister that we were not saying that Gautam Buddha is born in India. We always have believed that Gautam Buddha was actually born in Lumbini, Nepal. What we were referring to was his connection with India, which is beyond any dispute. Now, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Lumbini also highlights the fact that India has never disputed that Lumbini is the real birthplace of Gautam Buddha. As I highlighted earlier, Nepal is getting a lot of attention from world powers around the world, including the US, UK, and China. And that is why India is reiterating the fact that Nepal remains a top priority for us in our neighborhood. India, in fact, has also offered to set up satellite campus of IIT in Rupandehi and also signed a memorandum in this particular regard. Now, there were some other highlights of this visit as well. Nepal recently inaugurated its second international airport, that is a Gautam Buddha International Airport. And as per the reports, Nepal wanted Prime Minister to land at that airport so that it could have a lot of media attention and people would be more excited about this airport. However, that could not happen. Experts say that it was Nepal's inability to make appropriate arrangements for security for the Prime Minister to land at the new airport, which can be termed as a diplomatic failure. But at the end of the day, it was India's decision whether or not we feel secure at that airport for our Prime Minister to land there, which did not happen. This airport is only 18 kilometers from Lumbini, but it was not to be covered under this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi. PM Modi had also visited Nepal in 2014, soon after he had become the Prime Minister, when he announced that he would like to visit Pashupatinath, Muktinath, Janakpur, and Lumbini. He visited the first three shrines from 2014 and 2018, while Lumbini was due, which was covered during this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi to Nepal. The next article that we have here is written by the Union Minister of Culture, Tourism and Development of Northeastern Region under the Government of India, that is Mr. G. Kishan Reddy. The reason why he has written this article is because 18th of May is regarded as the International Museum Day. And thus he is highlighting the efforts that have been made by the government during its 1.5 tenures to increase the number of museums in India, to improve the condition of the existing museums and to make them much more famous amongst the common people in India so that the people can have interest in these museums and come and see the rich heritage and culture that India has. He is highlighting the fact that ever since the Modi government came to power in 2014, a lot of efforts have been taken in this regard. He said that while the previous governments in 2013 had said that they had no plans to set up any national tribal museum in the country, this current government has been able to recognize the role of over 200 tribal freedom fighters across the country, and 10 tribal freedom fighter museums are being set to highlight their culture and their contribution to India's independence. We also have the very well built Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya, that is a Prime Minister Museum, which highlights the contribution of each and every Prime Minister that India has had till now in its history. The Minister said that the government is also making efforts to get back the stolen heritage which is present in many other countries and was taken from India earlier. Whenever we get back such a heritage, it is also given due importance and is placed at the appropriate museums across the country. Many of these museums lie under the Ministry of Culture, but some of them are even controlled by the Railway Ministry and by other ministries with respect to their own specialization. To increase even more interest in these museums, the Ministry of Culture had organized the Global Summit on Reimagining Museums in India in February this year. A lot of new learnings were taken from this summit and they are being now implemented in museums across the country with the use of much more technology, immersive experiences, innovative curatorial skills, and also imaginative storytelling to ensure that the youth of the country knows about the rich cultural heritage that India is so proud of. Now, while it is highly appreciated what the government is doing with respect to museums, how they are making efforts to preserve these museums and ensure that more and more people turn up towards this, but the fact remains that for a better part of our independent history, we have not given the museums the kind of importance that they deserve. Now look at common people. When you go to France, Italy, UK, you go and stand in lines, you buy those expensive tickets to go and visit those museums. You go to Paris, you want to visit the Louvre Museum. You go to UK, London, then you want to visit the UK museums. But while you are in India, there is hardly a chance that anyone would make a plan or an outing specially to go and visit a museum. Unless you are a kid and your school teachers took you on a school picnic to museums, there's a good chance that you have never been to a museum by yourself. So a part of the blame has to be taken by us as well. Because the museums can only be maintained and only be funded if the common people show interest towards that. Apart from that, also there are many challenges that are facing Indian museums. For example, in most of our national museums, the posts of the directors are usually given to the IAS officers who are not from the field of arts, and they are not really aware of what steps can be taken in ensuring that these museums or these places attract people from across the society. We also have lack of skilled labor, because of which a lot of very significant and important pieces have been damaged. For example, the 2nd century BC Yakshi statue and the 3rd century BC Mauryan lion at India's oldest museum in Calcutta were damaged because of careless handling only. In 2010, UNESCO, in fact, in a report had brought out the terrible conditions of India's top 8 museums, including substandard maintenance, lack of lighting, no signage, and many other issues. Because of which there's a lack of audience in India's museums by far. And since the government also knows that not a lot of people turn up to these museums, not a lot of budget allocation is done in order to preserve the real heritage of India in these museums. Realizing this problem, in 2009, the Ministry of Culture had famously initiated 14-point museum reform program. Now let me tell you what these 14 points were. These included collection and store management, proper scientific display of artifacts, museum shops and souvenirs, image building, publicity, cultural events to take place inside these museums, multimedia, audiovisual and guide facilities, implementation of schemes, plans, etc. Let me give you a personal example. So when you go to museums outside the country, the famous museums, let's say in Italy, France, etc., in most of the museums, obviously when you look at a statue or you look at a piece, you can't really understand the real history behind it. So mostly there would be a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs that would be written which you can read. But apart from that, one other thing that usually happens in those museums is when you enter, they can give you kind of a MP3 player or kind of a Walkman that you used to have. Now, when you go to, let's say, a statue and there's a number written on that statue, number 7. On this MP3 player, you press the number 7, and in the audio version, it will tell you about that statue, the history, etc. So you keep on moving in the museum. Every statue or every artifact would have a number. Just press that number on that MP3 player which is given to you. Put the earphones in your ears and you can hear about the rich history and heritage. So you don't really need a guide per se. You don't really have to walk around and just be behind the guide. You can be your own guide over there just by using these MP3 players. So these kind of things do happen in most of the museums across the world, and it can be implemented in the Indian museums as well. The next article that we have here is focusing on the importance of cold chain systems. Now, in simple terms, cold chain systems means that while transporting vaccines, medicines, or even food products that are required to be stored at a lower temperature, you need to have refrigerated trucks or you need to have other refrigerated modes of transportation to ensure that you can maintain a low temperature. While it is used in food processing industry also, but it is much more important when it comes to the using of vaccines, because India has done the biggest vaccination program in the entire country under COVID, and before that also India since 1985 has been running the universal immunization program. We know the importance of developing these cold chain systems because the vaccines have to be transported to far off rural areas where they might not be stored at cold temperatures. That is why the government over the past few decades has invested a lot of money in building these cold storage systems. It is because of these systems only that India was able to roll out such a successful COVID-19 vaccination program. Because we already had these cold storage infrastructure in place under the immunization program that has been running since 1985, that infrastructure was actually utilized by the government to make sure that the availability of vaccine does not become an issue throughout the country. And that is why we should now invest even more money to ensure that even better system now prevails across the country, because this is not the last pandemic that we have had to face, and in the future we might need many more vaccines to be transported across the length and breadth of the country. The author here is saying that the success of any vaccination program relies on multiple factors, out of which the biggest one is the cold chain management. Because if this fails, the effectiveness or the potency of the vaccine is wasted. I don't know if you remember when the first few vaccines of COVID were developed in the US, that is the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. They were not brought to India because number one, they were very expensive, and the second reason was that they were required to be stored at a very, very low temperature. That could only be done if you have a very robust cold chain system existing throughout your country, which was not the case with India. That is why we had to wait for our Covishield or Covaxines, because they do not require such low temperatures for maintenance. Although they also require to be refrigerated, but not at such low temperatures. As per the author, nearly half of the vaccines distributed around the world go waste, because many of these vaccines go to developing or least developed nations that don't have this kind of a cold storage or transportation infrastructure. In India also, close to 20% of temperature sensitive healthcare products when they arrive are either damaged or they are degraded, because somewhere in the transportation line there is not enough cold storage, and that is what wastes the entire vaccine. Apart from the cold storage network, one other important factor that played a major role in ensuring success of our COVID vaccine program was the Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network, that is EVIN. Now, this network has been developed by Gavi, Vaccine Alliance, and implemented by the UN Development Program through a smartphone based app. In very simple terms, this is a software and a network using which you can have a real time data of how many vaccines are available in which part of the country, what is their temperature, have they been kept in cold storage or not, so that we have an up to date data and information about the vaccination status across the country. That has been extremely successful in ensuring that we have the COVID portal using which you can book your vaccine slots for COVID, which we have even exported to many other countries. All of that was possible because we already had this in place called Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network. Just to give you some more details about this, this network is an indigenously developed technology system, means it has been developed in India only, and the aim is to strengthen the immunization supply chain systems across the country. It supports the Government of India's Universal Immunization Program and provides real-time information on the vaccine stocks, flow, storage temperatures across all the cold chain points, so that, for example, let's say there's a truck driver who has to bring vaccines from point A to point B. Now, the truck driver in the middle of it may have had a problem with the truck and the temperature might have increased. Now, he does not want to tell the authorities because he thinks he will be punished. So he tells a lie, says that no, everything is fine. The vaccines were stored in cold temperature only. But this particular network will tell you the real data without even depending on any human interface in between. This will ensure that you don't have to depend on what any human beings report about these vaccines. And that is why it is so helpful for the government in rolling out such a program. This entire network combines technology, governance, and human resources to ensure that we can provide vaccines in all parts of the country, even the most underdeveloped areas included. Just to give you an idea, the vaccine wastage problem is actually a real problem across the country. As you can see here, this is a recent article which says that over 62 lakh COVID vaccine doses went to waste in India. Now, if you look at countries across the world, there may be countries which can be entirely covered with such 62 lakh COVID vaccine doses. So the wastage that we have of not just COVID but other vaccines also is extremely high. Now, temperature is not the only reason why the COVID vaccine might be wasted. There may be some other reasons also. For example, theft or damage to these vials, or maybe because once this vial opens, it has to be consumed within a certain amount of time. It has about 10 doses, so maybe you only have 5 patients and no other people are available to give that vaccine. Those can also be some of the reasons for vaccine wastage. However, the biggest reason by far remains a temperature related reason. That is, if it is exposed to heat, if it has not been kept at a proper temperature, that is when the vaccines can go waste. The national average of wasting COVID vaccine that we have is about 6.5%, which needs to be reduced much further. The next article that we have here is about the ongoing conflict at the Gyanvapi mosque in Varanasi and its relation with the Places of Worship Act. Now, for us, from the examination point of view, we are more interested in the provisions of the Places of Worship Act rather than in the ongoing conflict. So, just to give you an idea, what happened was recently there was a case filed in a local court in Varanasi saying that in the Gyanvapi mosque there might be some Hindu idols, there might be some Hindu related artifacts, and that is why there should be a survey in the mosque to identify whether it was always a mosque or whether there was a temple that existed here earlier which was converted into a mosque. Because of this, the Varanasi court ordered a survey to be conducted, and the survey report that has not come out officially till now, but as per some of the media, the reports say that there was a shivling that was found in this mosque. Now, just to repeat, this is not a confirmed report. These are just allegations that have been made by a part of the media. Now, in all of this, for us, the most important part is the Places of Worship Act of 1991. Now, what is this law? In simple terms, this law says that the status of all the places of worship in the country have been seized as they were on 15th August 1947. In other words, if before this particular day there was a mosque, it shall remain as a mosque. Or before this date, if there was a temple, it shall remain as a temple. No conversion of any place of worship will now be allowed in India. The one exception under this law was given to the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi dispute, which was still being heard in the court. Except this, apart from that, no other place of worship in India would now be changed from one religion to the other. That is what this law says. That is the 1991 law. It prohibits any legal proceedings from being heard in the court regarding the character of a place of worship and declares that all the appeals pending before any court or authority shall not be heard except the Ram Janmabhoomi matter, which was decided by the Supreme Court a few years back unanimously. Meaning that any case about a place of worship that was converted after 15th August can still continue. If you want to file a case saying that before 15th August 1947, a temple was converted into a mosque or a mosque was converted into a temple, that will not be allowed. But if a conversion of a religious place was done after this date, then the court can hear the matter. This is what this law is. Simple. The law has certain other exceptions. The 1991 Act will not apply to ancient and historical monuments which are covered under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act of 1958. Also, whatever disputes have been settled by the parties before this act will remain settled. So no new things will be heard about the settlements that have already been done before this act came into being. Now if you come back to the Gyanvapi mosque case, what has happened is that since the Hindu devotees went to the local court and they said that this mosque used to be a temple and we want a survey done of this mosque. People who are against this, that is the people who are maintaining the mosque or who are from the side of the mosque, they are saying that this order by the court to conduct a survey or even the court's attempt to hear this particular case goes against the 1991 Act. The Act very clearly says that any matters settled before 15th August 1947 will not be heard in this particular case. So the local court, while appointing a commissioner or by conducting a survey, is going against the 1991 Act, and that is why they are saying that the High Court or the Supreme Court should intervene and they should strike down the order of the local court. The one other view that is being given by the Vishwa Hindu Parishad is that there has not been a change in the religious stature since 1947. Hindus have always been performing puja at this site. So we are not saying that this mosque and its status has been changed. We are just saying that this is a place where Hindus have always been performing their worship and they should be allowed to continue. As I said earlier, in this entire issue for us, the most significant part is the important provisions of the Places of Worship Act. If you look at the title of this act, it is an act to prohibit conversion of any place of worship and to provide for maintenance of religious character as it existed on 15th August 1947. So no conversions to be allowed after this. Whatever has happened before this is settled. So this is what the act wants to do. That is, any conversion that was done at any religious place before this date will not be taken up. After this date, if there was a religious site that was converted from one religion to the other, then those matters only will be taken up. Section 3 of the Act bars the conversion of a place of worship or any religious denomination into a place of worship of a different religious denomination or even a different segment of the same religious denomination. Section 4, subsection 8 declares the religious character of a place shall continue to be the same as it existed on 15th August 1947. As I said earlier, there was an exception that was given by this act to Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid case under section 5 of this act. This particular act was actually passed when we had P.V. Narasimha Rao as a Prime Minister of the country. It was a time when the Ram Temple movement led by BJP was at its peak, and the government wanted to make sure that there are no other disputes that come up in the country apart from this. That is why a law was introduced that apart from the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi case, all the other disputes would be considered as settled. The next article that we have here for you is talking about the recent decision of the government of India to ban the export of wheat. Now, this has been a very fast change of mind for the government. As you know, this year there were many important things that we saw in wheat specifically. Number one, because Ukraine and Russia export a large amount of wheat throughout the world, because of their ongoing crisis, the wheat production from any of these two countries was not enough to be exported. So in the international market, there was shortage of wheat. So they looked towards India because India usually has a bumper wheat production year after year, and India is in a position to export this. And India also agreed to this. Why? Number one, it will bring us more foreign exchange. Secondly, because the prices of wheat were increasing in the international market, we thought that our farmers will be able to earn more money because of this. In fact, till May 12th, the center government had actually sent trade delegations to Morocco, Tunisia, Indonesia, and many other countries to explore the possibilities of boosting our wheat exports. However, all of a sudden, the government of India on 13th of May decided to ban the export of wheat. So just a few days after the government decided to increase our production of wheat and export of wheat, we have a news that the government now will not allow export of wheat. Why? The government is saying that there is a lot of wheat inflation in India. The prices of wheat are increasing internally, domestically, and if India's wheat is exported, then our own local consumers would have to pay more money. That is why we are banning the export of wheat to ease out and cool down wheat related inflation, especially within the country. The other worry for the government is that there has been a decline in the wheat production after many years. The government has also revised down its estimate of the wheat production from 111.32 million tons to 105 million tons. The main reason being the intense heat waves that we are seeing across the country, especially in wheat producing areas of Punjab and Haryana. The wheat prices have been rising not just internationally but within the country also. In March, the wholesale inflation of wheat crossed 14% mark. On 17th of May, the average price of wheat flour that is consumed across the country in India is about 33.05 rupees per kg, which is much higher as compared to the regular price that you pay for buying wheat flour in the country. Government has given certain exceptions, mainly in those trade agreements that we had already signed before this ban came into picture. So government has allowed the consignment that is going to Egypt. We have also allowed those consignments that were registered in the custom department systems before 13th of May when the government decided to impose the export ban. As I said earlier, the biggest reason behind this decrease in production is the high temperature that we are seeing, which is much higher than usual in the states of Punjab and Haryana. In Punjab, between April 8 and 14, the maximum temperature was 6 degrees higher as compared to the usual temperature that we see year after year in this particular part. That is why the wheat production is declining in these states as well. As you can see here on this graph, internationally also, ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, there has been a sudden surge in the wheat prices. You can see it was in the end of Feb that the invasion started. Since then, the prices of wheat have increased considerably throughout the world, and that is why many countries are now looking towards India to fulfill their wheat requirements. On the other hand, India's concern, as you can see on this graph, is the decreased production. Before this, for many consecutive years, since 2014, the wheat production in India had increased year after year. So you can see from 14 to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, every single year, the wheat production had increased. Now, it would be for the first time in 6 years that wheat production will decline as compared to the last year, which is being seen as a big concern for the Indian government, leading to this particular decision. Now, the people who are against this are arguing with their own points. They are saying that this actually presented an opportunity for our farmers for a change to earn more money. But the government, by coming in between, has actually taken a step which goes against the interests of the farmers. Rather than this, what the government should have done is government should have announced a bonus of 200 to 250 rupees per quintal over the MSP so that the farmers could actually sell their wheat to the government itself. Now, if you think of it from the farmers' point of view, they sell a lot of wheat to the government because government has to procure it and then they have to give it to the poor people in the country under the food security programs that are being run. Because the government was scared that the wheat prices are increasing and they would have to pay a higher price, it is because of that that the government has banned the export of wheat, which has forced the farmers to not export the wheat but sell it to the government only. So government, rather than thinking that they have to pay a higher price to the farmer, should have been happy that for a change it is increasing the money in the hands of the farmers. Secondly, there is also a point that government of India does not need to continue the free food grain scheme till September end. The scheme started under the COVID-19 pandemic and the government of India is continuing it month after month, which is putting a lot of extra financial pressure on the government. And it is because of this only that the government of India has to procure so much wheat from these farmers. Instead of this, what the government should have done is offered cash to the poor people to allow them to buy whatever kind of food that they want, from milk to egg to pulses. So in simple terms, it is time for the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana to end. Thirdly, if the government really thinks that the wheat inflation in India is increasing so much, the government could have put some minimum export price. That is, the government from its own side could have increased the prices of wheat, ask the exporters that you have to sell at certain minimum price so that not all the wheat is sold, and if it is sold, it is giving a good price to the farmers. Similar to how the US government says that if you are giving H1B visa to people coming from outside the US, you have to give them a certain minimum salary so that you can only take it if you can afford it. A similar kind of approach could have been taken from the Indian government side also. Lastly, the experts say that the government should have understood that inflation is a global phenomena. We saw in yesterday's CNA also how US and other Western nations are also going through inflation, with the US clocking 8.5% of inflation. So India is not an outlier in that sense. We can't imagine that just by banning the export of wheat, all the food inflation will be controlled in India. So this is not a step in the right direction. These are the articles that we wanted to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number one, what is Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network? How did it help in India's COVID vaccination program? Second, governments are as responsible towards preserving our past as they are for ensuring a better future. In this context, assess the government's efforts to give an impetus to museums in India. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.